Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is John. This report is for the 20th of March, and as we approach spring, the excitement of, the current rally is just fading off a little bit here. We had the steel dip below cyan, which it generates a little bit of weakness. At the same time, midterm buyers kind of fading off. Not a surprise as we end towards the end of the month here. We still have rising red. We're at negative 0.28, meaning we're almost back up to the zero after the complete reset. Pretty amazing to have a complete reset up here at the highs, right off that algo support that we had, and that leaves the ABM yellow value right here around 28.16ish. From a retrace standpoint, we could see the slow decay in the even in the 50K. If I put it up real quick before we move on to there, we ended up with the DOC spread still with magenta over plus 15. So the expectation wasn't for huge decline, especially with the reset of steel. Just when the steel is slightly above at this particular point, you can expect a little bit of a decay, and then it dipped back below negative 13, which is enough to give it a little bit of support, and then boom, steel crossing back above the red, which is the first indication you look for. And of course, you would expect to see it cross above cyan. It's not doing that in this particular case, which means we can expect probably a little bit more back and forth on it. It did come all the way down to the 38% on the 50K, but it's completely reset of the shakeout from that 50K. So things are set for potential for another turnaround point if it gives that reading early enough on. Here we have the euro still getting into that stall point. We kind of saw this was coming with the spider that was taking place. Short-term buyers kind of held on to things, didn't dip below steel yet, which would result in what we would expect to see a decent drop, something right around down to that 112 and a half, unless we can break into a new zone with the red, but it seemed to be kind of that return back ceiling, and nothing new happening, so everything's pretty much in a stasis point, which still, I think everyone's going to be looking for the next, both unemployment readings as well as forecasts going forward. Things look to have stalled a little bit on the labor market, but a lot of that could have been weather, so we'll see if it improves. The fact that weather's still an issue at this particular point for parts of the U.S. Gold, kind of flat. No surprise with that one right there. Intraday was kind of a little bit more interesting. I mean, we had this just continuation of cyan underneath, red, which is still always bullish. We were well above the 13, but then we get this sort of faux signal, and the problem with it is that when you have that magenta over the plus 15, you know that you're in a pretty strong bullish run. Fine, steel was below negative 13, which is effectively like it coming from the top, but immediately rejected that on there. So I'm not looking for much on this kind of a short signal at all, other than if I wanted to take a little bit of gain and look for the fact that I'm going to get a return, pop back up, and something on a lower shakeout setup is going to be much more attractive, like this one was. Didn't produce all that much, just 50% with the rising low. Met the 50% right about there, and you get the full green over cyan at that particular point. You had the dip below a couple bars earlier, which was right around the 61% range. So even from the earlier standpoint, now that led to the push to the new highs, but then we ended up with a very clean DOC spread. We also, again, one of those where you're above the 15, so you're looking at when this crosses over, okay, am I going to get a stabilization? And it did. What you expect to happen pretty quickly after that cross of the orange, though, is a move of steel above cyan. That didn't happen until later, right about here, which coincidentally right at the low, so it's not a buy, but I usually look for these as sort of a cover point to say, okay, hey, if you break down from there, then I can catch it again, but the potential for a bounce back is pretty decent at that stage. We ended up with our dip below the orange line right about there, then the full green crossover around the 47. We got above the 50, went all the way up to 61. And then we started to produce this situation where we weren't getting rising red. We had already had the dip of steel below with the cross, so that's your short snake right there with the spread, and just continued to decay from there. The brief attempt at the pop-up in this particular case just didn't produce anything, and then you were left with just straight decay. And beautiful with orange right in the continuation. It makes it easy to follow that kind of setup until the orange dips below the red. And that happened with the crossover of yellow. If we look at what the readings were, it was less than 1, so you'd have to really kind of wait for that next bar that gives you the bonus. And you can see that it produces those X's there, and it still took a couple bars. But that produced a move right back up to the 50, and again, same configuration right there. Not a DLC spread in the sense of the red cyan coming from red underneath, but clearly green collapses underneath, and you're in full short snake mode by the time you get to this bar right here. And that takes us back to the new lows, and of course, then we just got a reset of everything. The problem for this rally right now is no reset of the steel, so it's likely to suffer a bit of a retrace coming back in here. We also have falling highs, which are helping to pull price up a little bit here in this case. Still, not necessarily a sustainable thing with that steel unless you get a complete reset of it or a significant rise in red that overtakes it. But all in all, that was some kind of normalized action. There wasn't anything in particular that was super special. Just the warning when you get that plus 15. Looking for that breakdown is important. I was cautious on this one and expecting it to potentially bounce back up, but it couldn't quite get that crossover. And this is that dynamic nature of staying with what the readings are. We were in a continuation with the orange until it finally dipped all the way back here, which made for a decent move. So those are the special keys to look for in those situations, but fairly clean stuff. I think that this was finally that wear off, and literally from zone to zone, once we broke out past it, there was nothing up here to really fight with. It was just a matter of waiting for significant breakdown. But then once we got back to the algo level, we were right at that 45, and then once it broke below, we had the previous 39, and then of course, not a surprise, right at the 28.30, and so that looks to be the new support zone line, and again we'll get resistance right at the 39 again, and rinse and repeat, as I like to say. So good stuff. As always though, if we get anything exciting going on here, I will certainly put it up and let you know. Trade well. We'll talk to you later.